Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Welcome into another edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast. I am Bennett Conlin, joined by Jack Fitzpatrick, and fall camp is underway.
Fall camp's finally here, and for this week's edition of the JMU Sports News Podcast, we're both going to pose 3 questions that we want answered in training camp heading into week 1 against Bucknell. So 3 questions each. We don't know what each other's questions are, and then we'll dive into some Twitter questions that you all submitted kind of when fall camp was report day. I think that was 3 days ago now when we're recording. So a jam-packed episode. And I don't want to speak for Bennett here, but I am super pumped that football's back. I think you said this maybe a week ago. I've never been more excited for a football season. I don't think I've ever been this excited for a September.
I can't wait. The schedule is awesome. The year should be good. And the constant realignment churn and conversations almost has me more excited because I'm just so tired of it.
It's so stupid. Like, I get...
It just feels like it completely eliminates like the bottom half of the FBS. Like it takes the group of 5 and just says like you're essentially irrelevant.
Yeah.
Like what's Florida State going to do? There's 15 programs that everyone cares about, which I think is such a like simplistic, sad way to look at the sport.
And maybe we shouldn't just jump right into conference realignment talk here at the jump of this podcast as we're talking about JMU, a group of 5 school training camp getting started, and the questions and excitement we have around the season. But like, it also feels like it kind of takes away from the student athlete experience because like USC has to now fly to Iowa. They have to fly to Ann Arbor. Like
you've got Rutgers, right? Rutgers is in the Big Ten.
Rutgers, more so like just from not necessarily like the money aspect of it, but like the student athlete perspective, it's a lot easier to fly from USC to Eugene, Oregon to play a football game than it is to fly to Iowa City.
And some of its last point for me, at least, is frustrating where it's like I'm supposed to believe that the Big Ten outside of like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, maybe Iowa, I'm supposed to believe that this league, just because it has a lot of money, is like an elite level league, like Indiana, Rutgers, Purdue. Like I think JMU could hang with like every team outside of the top 4 in the Big Ten. I'd probably hang with Wisconsin.
I'd argue that like the Pac-12 has done more. Like in like the college football playoff time, I feel like they've gotten like a more rounded group of teams into the college football playoff and like have teams more consistently knocking on the door. It seems like they were a more well-rounded conference than the Big Ten and Big 12. Okay, so
it's wacky.
These conversations will persist throughout the rest of training camp, the rest of the football season, I suspect, and into basketball and into baseball and into the offseason and into next year when we're talking around this time next year. We'll always have conference realignment talk to rely on. But you know what conversations we don't always have to rely on?
That's a good question. New
sponsors and old.
Very exciting time to be us. We have, what do we have? We have 2 sponsors currently secured for the upcoming football season, leading off with our good friends at 3 Notch, which are actually going beyond football season, right? We've got them through March, I think it was.
Yeah, we are pumped about this 3-notched sponsorship. Say that 3 times fast for this upcoming football and basketball season. We have a lot of fun, cool, interesting things coming down the pipeline for the rest of this football season, even in potentially the basketball season. So be on the lookout for that. If you're ever in Harrisonburg, check out the 3-Notched Valley Collab House. But they also have locations in Charlottesville, some fantastic food at their Charlottesville location, as well as Roanoke, Virginia Beach, and Richmond. And you can sign up for their Fresh Beer Club. You can check out more of that information. The link is in the description of the podcast, or you can just go to 3-Notched website and check out the Fresh Beer Club. A lot of great stuff, and we're really excited for what is coming the rest of this season with 3-Notched. Super pumped that they're back on board with us for this 2023 JMU football season.
That's a big one. We were excited about that one, so excited to have them on board again, which helps us with a number of things. and including potentially bringing someone on, which we may have an update on in the next 2 or 3 weeks, possibly.
Yeah, very excited about kind of the growth we have projected out for this 2023 JMU football season. A lot of great content coming that I think otherwise we wouldn't necessarily be able to do without the help of everyone who's been listening throughout. And not to like get on a soapbox and get all sappy here as we head into JMU football season, but shout out to everyone who's kind of contributed. This is year 5 for us. We are starting the 5th year of JMU Sports News podcast. And so we're just pumped that we've had people tune in nearly on a weekly basis for the last 5 years and listen to us ramble at times. And the listeners, the followers, whatever it may be, big reason why we're able to bring this content to you guys, and we continue to grow and get 3 Notched on board and get a brand new sponsor on board for this season. Bennett, do you want to let us know who our new sponsor is?
Yeah, this is an exciting one, and I know a lot of people here are probably expecting some bet online talk, but that's not where we're going. We have stayed in Harrisonburg for Christopher William Jewelers.
Jewelers has been voted best of Virginia year after year. It's not just one thing that sets us apart. It's everything. It's the selection, extensive and unmatched, with every engagement ring, loose diamond, and fashion jewelry chosen for quality and brilliance. It's the service. From our diamond experts to our master goldsmith, our team shares a passion for what they do, and it shows. It's the atmosphere, both glamorous and laid back. See for yourself why people can't stop talking about Christopher William Jewelers in Harrisonburg and Weir's Cave.
Heck yeah. Very excited about having Christopher William Jewelers on board for the football season as well.
Yeah, and hopefully maybe we can buy ourselves some big old rings to go along with the Sunbelt East rings that JMU will likely win at the end of this season. And then what everyone else was expecting, BetOnline is your number one source for all of your betting needs. That is right, folks. You can get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up and get in on the action. When you use promo code BELIEVE, that is BLEAV, when you sign up, you'll get a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. So you throw $200 down on your first deposit, they'll hook you up with $100 for free as a thank you for signing up with promo code BELIEVE. Bet online, where the game starts.
We're a rocket ship, man. Look at all this growth. Stop.
And where this podcast is starting, as Bennett is pretending to be a rocket ship, we got some questions that we want answers to about over the course of this next month. Do you want to take us away with your first question for the JMU football training camp?
Yes. Setting some ground rules. Are we avoiding altogether the obvious who's the starting quarterback, or shall that be one of our 6 questions?
Well, that will be one of our Twitter questions. So we have a few Twitter questions that we kind of stayed away from. What will this year's thing to complain about be now that there are over 10 beer stands? And we are complainers. So
we're huge complainers.
You do have to answer this because now that they have squashed out one of our major complaints, we will have to find something else to complain about. Tyler Reskovac asks, what's the biggest strength we have going into 2023? And then I kind of countered that with, what's the biggest weakness too? What would be your pick for a new team walk-in song, assuming that's part of the game day overhaul? Also, are you okay with them never playing Start Wearing Purple again?
I love this question. Yeah, that's a good one.
And then Barnett or McLeod. So we're staying away from those, and we're kind of hitting our overall 3 questions that aren't those Twitter questions.
Good ground rules. We will get to those, folks. So I think my first question, and I'll stick with one here that I guess can be answered more so in camp and is sort of the nitty-gritty details. I've got some that are a little more broad later. I'm interested to learn more about special teams, and I don't know how much exactly we'll learn during camp, but they've talked a lot about improved overall depth. So I think there's probably going to be guys on the roster who are good players, but maybe not good enough quite yet to break into like the 2 deep on offense or defense, who get special teams reps. Hopefully some really good athletes there that could be beneficial. They brought in Ryan Hansen, the punter from Arkansas State, who's expected to be one of the best in the league. But then, like, they were inconsistent last year with Camden Wise on field goals. What does he look like? What do the kickers look like? And then special teams, they had a few just like blown assignments. I think they gave up a blocked punt for a touchdown against Georgia Southern, if I'm not mistaken. I think there was some stat on Twitter that I saw as well that like the last 2 seasons, teams that have like scored on a blocked punt have won like 75% of those games. So you can't be giving up those kind of miscues. So I'm really fascinated to learn more about special teams because it doesn't get a lot of discussion, but it's an area that JMU was, I would say, surprisingly bad last year.
I'd say they've been kind of mediocre, if not bad, for the last few years. I mean, you could argue the collapse against Sam Houston State started because of special team errors. Really, the last time that I can remember them having a dynamic return game, too, was when they had D'Angelo Amos back there returning punts and returning kicks, and he returned a few back for touchdowns that season.
Yeah.
Since then, it just seems like they've been content with kind of just playing the field position game and not necessarily risking it with return. So that's a great point because special teams has been an underwhelming part of this team over the last, let's say, 2, maybe 3 years.
And you were in the beer line, I think, for a lot of this, but the Georgia State
game. I missed all of this because I was in the beer line, which we did complain about a lot last season.
They like couldn't field kickoffs and punts for just a 10-minute stretch of game time. They were really struggling there. So like little things like that where they were just giving opponents either touchdowns or crazy short fields was surprising for a team that like in every other aspect appears to be very well coached. And I'm not saying they're not well coached in special teams, but they appear to just be so solid everywhere else that if they can get special teams sort of under control and maybe making some of those more dynamic plays, we'll see if they go with Surratt again at punt return. I kind of liked him there and thought he did some nice things in his limited opportunities. That'd be cool. Like, let's get some return touchdowns, maybe start blocking some punts, stop giving up those big plays, take advantage of field goals like inside of 35 yards, which is sort of what Racky was so good at, just making those like you should make this kind of field goal. If they can do that, I think it gives them a lot of room for error on offense and defense.
Yeah, and I also think we kind of have overlooked the special team woes over the last few years because they've had fun guys at punter with Harry O'Kelly, and then they had arguably the best kicker in college football in recent memory in Ethan Racky. But then there's so many facets to the special teams game that 50% of it was so good that the other 50% was kind of overlooked, which was arguably bad. But I love that question. My first question is which wide receiver will separate and be the go-to wide receiver one this upcoming season? You have 18 wide receivers currently on the roster, 8 tight ends as well. You have a few transfers in Dolison, Sproles, and Taji Hudson, and Elijah Surratt. Then you got Reggie Brown kind of in there. I expect those are the guys that maybe kind of trying to get more of those quote-unquote first-team reps, those wide receiver one reps. But I'd love to know who you think will kind of separate and be that wide receiver one for this upcoming season. They lost Chris Thornton, who put up magnificent numbers and was one of the most reliable pass catchers. They lost Antoine Wells, of course. So who's going to become that WR1?
This is a great question. And we had a late submission from Alex092975 that was similar. It was asking about who will the starting receivers be. Another good question. That's one of the bigger camp questions, right? I think in terms of who wins that. I feel pretty confident that Reggie Brown's going to be sort of their wide receiver one, just from what they've said throughout the spring. He seems like he's been healthy. When he was healthy last year, he was a really solid player. So I like Reggie Brown as wide receiver one. After that, I think it gets pretty interesting. I'd be shocked if Sproles doesn't have a solid role with the receivers. I think Phoenix Sproles, North Dakota State transfer, is going to get a decent amount of reps. Dollison is one that his speed they've sort of hyped up a lot. I think Signetti says he got to 22.7 miles per hour.
Holy!
He said that at media day, just sort of slipped it in, which is, you can't teach that kind of speed. Like that's
all right.
High end.
Look at that cliche coming out already. First official JMU Football podcast. Cliche number one, folks. We have it. Don't look any further. Cliche number one.
There are things that you can actually teach, like coach up certain things. Jamison Williams for the Lions apparently doesn't put his hands together when he's catching football. So that'll be an interesting thing to monitor.
Also loves betting sports.
Yeah, but he's gonna have a big year. But anyway, there are things that like you can sort of help guys with in terms of route running and maybe some stuff with catching. But when you have somebody who can run that fast, I think it gives him a good chance to throw himself in there. After that, it kind of seems like it's wide open. I think Hudson and Lewis, the two ECU transfers with Troy Lewis coming in last year and then Taji Hudson coming in this offseason, both have a lot of size. Elijah Surratt is one, Josh's brother, who I think has a ton of potential, had a great freshman year at the FCS level before transferring to JMU. But he missed a lot of the spring with like a soft tissue injury. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of opportunities for multiple guys. My guess though would be the trio of Brown, Sproles, and Dollison are like three that I'd be surprised if they aren't in the mix, just given their experience and skill set.
Yeah, I also think, granted, they didn't play a lot together, but there is some sort of chemistry already created between Jordan McLeod and
Yeah.
Dolison. Both of them South Florida kids. Both of them played at South Florida. So I think there's a little bit of familiarity there. They know how each other play. They know what to expect out of each other. So I think that's going to be key if McLeod wins, when McLeod wins the QB1 position, giving a little hint, a little foreshadowing to later in the podcast. I think Dolison may be an early target for him. That's just kind of familiarity. I think Sproles will be the wide receiver one. I think he had the best spring game. There seemed to be already a connection brewing between Sproles and McLeod as well. Sproles can go up there and get it. So I think he may be poised to be kind of that wide receiver one. Or maybe I should rephrase that, because kind of the way it seems like Cignetti likes to have his wide receivers is kind of have the big play guy and then the possession guy. Chris Thornton just happened to be really good at doing both. But like when it was Thornton and Wells was the big play. Thornton could just run the slant and get you 7 yards. So I wouldn't be surprised if Sproles is the kind of go down there and get it, and Reggie Brown is Mr. Reliable. When you need 5 yards, boom, you go to Reggie Brown. Also, I think you'll see Taylor Thompson, the Charlotte transfer at tight end, slot out a lot more and play as a tight end wide receiver hybrid. And you'll see him in a lot of passing packages. That's my expectation for Taylor Thompson, because kid is not a traditional Cignetti tight end.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. They've got a ton of guys, maybe more so than they've had ever, or at least during our time sort of covering the team, who are like 6'3" and above with like ability, right? At one point is pretty much just like
last year we loved Maxwell James because he was the only guy above like 6'2".
Yeah, he had some ability. They've got Max Moss, who Cignetti mentioned as like, forget exactly what interview it was. I was listening to too many Sunbelt Media Day interviews with, with him. But at one point he shouted him out as like the one true freshman he thinks has some potential to maybe play. I'm sure there are some others that can work their way through camp, but talented player there. They've got a lot of size, which I feel like in the past it was Riley Stapleton and tight ends. So definitely a little bit of a change.
Yeah. Second question for you.
Second question here. So I can go a number of ways. I can go super broad, or I could go with another nitty gritty detail. Which would we prefer?
Let's go broad, because all three of my questions, not saying that my questions are more important than yours, but they're all nitty gritty.
Okay. I'll do two broads in my next two.
And maybe we can just throw in a nitty gritty one at the end and just have some fun with it.
Okay. Here's my question that I think requires a lot of, well, it really has nothing to do with JMU's camp. A lot of it has to do with looking at other camps and sort of how things develop. But we've talked all off season about September being super hard, like super hard.
Which it is.
But is it? That's my question. Is September as hard as we think it is?
So
go ahead. Yeah.
Well, so it's Bucknell, easy. Then you have 2 road games against non-conference opponents at UVA, which isn't really a road game. That's a 45-minute bus ride, which is essentially the bus ride they take when they were staying at hotels up in Stanton or whatever it was. Remember when Houston had them do that? I think they stay at Hotel Madison now, but
yeah, that was funny.
Essentially the same. And then they go to Logan, Utah. That's a hike, but they have gone out to Utah recently. Under Cignetti, they did go out to Weber State and play in Ogden against Weber State in 2019. So was that 2019? Or 21? It was 21.
21. They played them at home in 19, I think, in the playoffs.
So you have that, which it's not necessarily a completely new trip because you've gone out there before. and Utah State is just picked to finish 8th out of 12 in the Mountain West. The reason I think it is such a tough month isn't because of the non-conference games. It's because of the 2 conference games. You're on the road at Troy and then at home to finish out the month against South Alabama just 7 days after you go out to Logan, Utah. Like the conference games are so much more difficult. They are against West teams, but if you rack up 2 losses in those games, then you're already kind of out of the Sun Belt running before the season even starts. And to me, that's why September is such a big month. If we go 2-2 and the 2 wins are against the non-conference teams and 2 losses are against the 2 Sun Belt West teams, that's not good. Now, if you go 2-2 with the 2 wins against conference, that's amazing. And to me, that's why September is such a tough month. But I mean, it doesn't get much easier than from there. October, you have Georgia Southern, Marshall, ODU. And then you finish the season out with App State and Coastal Carolina. So, I mean, it's not an easy schedule by any means.
I think that's what sort of stands out the most to me there is like UVA's picked to finish last in the ACC. Like if you could pick one Power 5 team that beating them would have meaning and also they're supposed to suck, like you'd pick UVA. And then they happen to be on the schedule. Utah State, not expected to be great. They've got some question marks. The conference games are going to be tough for sure. Like Troy and South Alabama, there's no doubt. Those are tough, but it's just like, I think like November is sneaky tough with Georgia State on the road and then UConn sort of a little trap game before App State. We don't know what UConn will actually be, but then App State and Coastal is a tough way to end the year, especially if you have motivation waning, depending on what happened in previous months. I think the whole schedule's reasonably tough, but I think that at times maybe we've overinflated just how much of a grind. And I think September's gonna be really hard, right? Because they have 3 consecutive road games.
Well,
And then you come back home. It'll be tough.
The grind is going to Utah.
That'll be tough. Like, and then
there's just not a lot of Utah games that you can do to get prepared. You know, like there's not a lot you can do to prepare for a road trip to Utah.
It's tough. Like I'm not pretending it's not tough. I also think like they could get through it better than maybe we've expected. I just think the fact that like Virginia and Utah State are not actually I don't know if they have a losing record at the end of September, factoring in the Bucknell game, I'd be kind of surprised.
What is your expectation for the month of September? Because mine's 3-1.
Well, they got
4-1,
so that's
4-1. I always I put out the Bucknell game kidding. Because
no, we've pretty much thrown that out, so that makes sense. I think they could go 4-1 too. I think that would make a lot of sense. And even if they do go, like if they do, I think for me, like, and maybe we'll get into this later in the off season, but like if they go 7-5 or 8-4, I'm not viewing that as a bad season. Like I think that would be okay. So then the way I look at it is like if you go 4-0 in non-conference, which I think is pretty doable, all you got to do is go 4-4 in league games. And you're 8-4. You could go 3-5 and still hit 7-5.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have, like, I think a lot of JMU fans expect them to be the kings of the East again.
Yeah, I don't necessarily expect that.
You know? I don't expect that, and I don't think that is how you should be rating if this is a successful season or not, because what they did last year, I think, was an anomaly, and we'll see kind of a regression to the mean here this year. Where 8-4, to me, is a great year for year 2 of a transition to FBS.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like that would be really solid. And you could still have a really good team, arguably maybe even a better team than last year and go 8-4. I guess what excites me the most is that I think that like the Virginia game is about as gettable as a Power 5 game as you could possibly have. That's where I think that if they start 2-0, you go into the Troy game. And that's not like I think a lot of people, including myself, have sort of chalked that up like, yeah, that could be a loss. Like that's probably a loss. The spread for that game is going to be so tight. That's very winnable, even though it's like hard.
Troy last year, let me look it up real quick. I should have had this ready. Troy was the 45th best team in the nation, according to EPA. JMU was 21st. What separated Troy from the rest of the pack in the Sun Belt West was timely offense and fantastic defense. But JMU was the better offense and the better defense when you're looking at it on expected points added on a per play and per game basis. And I don't think JMU is going to regress that much. And I don't
Right.
think Troy's going to regress that much. I think they're going to be very similar teams. So I mean, I think that's a gettable game. The tough part about it is on the road in a city you've never played in before.
It'll be tough. I think it's one that just gets me. The more I look at September, the more I think they could. It'll be hard, but I think they could sort of battle their way to a really good record. I think it could be like they've got the pieces if quarterback fills in the way they needed to be special. That's sort of my thought.
Yeah. Question number 2 from me. I'm going to go to one of my extras because I prefer it over one of the ones I had already done. Which defensive, this is a nitty gritty one, which defensive lineman will step up and fill the void left by Isaac Ukwu and Jamari Edwards?
Good question.
So the guys I kind of laid out, Jalen Green, Mikel Kamara, Jamri Chroma, and apologies if I'm getting his name wrong.
No, that's right.
Okay, and Abi Nwabaku Akonji.
Yep.
So I think out of all of those guys, Kamara is probably the one, and we've talked at length about him, is the one poised to have that breakout year. Last year in just 5 games, he had 12 tackles, 4.5 of them for loss, 4 sacks, and he forced a fumble. If you extrapolated that out over 11 games, he had 26 tackles, 10 TFLs, 9 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He would have led the team in sacks and forced fumbles.
If he's healthy for a full season, his per game stats are like above Ukwu. Like he's very good. And one of the games that he like played part of and got banged up was Louisville. Like he's very good.
I think he may be the guy on the defensive line. I think he can fill the void of both Ukwu and Edwards.
There are a couple guys that you look at them and it's like, that's somebody I think a Power 5 school is going to try to like tamper with. And he's one of the players that if he's healthy, his phone will be like lighting up this offseason.
Yeah, I also didn't include Carpenter or Emmanuel Bush because those are more of interior guys and they kind of play a different game of football than what your edge rushers do. But do you think there's anyone else outside of Kamara that like has the potential to make a big jump and kind of become, for all intents and purposes, the second best defensive edge rusher?
I think Bush will have to hold his own in the middle to really help out with some of the Edwards loss because he was pretty good when they stuck him in there with Carpenter, those two sort of inside, and they rotate some guys. So that'll be tough for sure. But the edge, I like pretty much everyone on the edge. I think Jalen Green is the one who's really going to have the breakout, where I've sort of dubbed him as like, yeah, that guy can really get after the passer. He has 5 sacks his whole JMU career. That's crazy looking at that number, that it's that low.
Yeah, he only had 2.5 last year and only 6 TFLs.
Because I think, he was just not getting maybe the same snap count, and certainly they can still rotate guys in this year, but apparently he had a huge spring and looked great. I mean, I think he could match last year's sack total by like week 3. Like, I think he's going to have a really...
He might match that sack total after Bucknell.
You have to give enough snaps. So I think he's due for a big year, and I think Kamara, those two are really going to step up for him. And then obviously the Bush addition in the middle, he figures to play pretty well against the run. I've heard he has some decent I think is James Carpenter at Media Day. I don't have like sources. Heard he's got a decent set of pass rush moves. So I'm amped to see the D line. I think they'll be good even without Ukwu.
Yeah. Your next question?
I will say one last point. Ukwu was really good. I was watching like some film the other day, and there's plays where like his closing speed when a guy like leaves the pocket to catch them was just absurd.
He was really good. And I think you kind of discredit this at times, like in the run game, but like a backside type of guy, like to kind of give it to an NFL analogy, Max Crosby is really good as a backside run defender because he can get off his block and then chase down the running back if they're running to the opposite side of the line. Ukwu added that as well. And that doesn't come up as tackles for losses most of the time.
Right.
Or like, of course they don't come up for sacks. Stupid point by me. But like, those are just a tackle. But the difference in tackling a guy 2 yards from the line of scrimmage or 6 yards from the line of scrimmage makes up for a huge, huge deficit throughout a game. And that's what Ukwu could do.
Also generally fascinated to see Nwabaku Akonji and Chroma, who they've moved, I believe, to edge, and they're both 270 plus now. Like they've added a bunch of weight, and they're like, let's move them outside also. So.
I feel like also every year we're talking about Nwabaku Akonji, and we always stumble through his name, but we're always like, this is a guy that you got to watch out for. And I think mainly because he was a Big Ten transfer in because he started his career
He
at Minnesota.
started to look the part more last year, I would say.
He's coming off of a career high in tackles and TFLs, and he's only gotten better each year. He was half a sack off of a career high in sacks. So, like, he's learning the system and he is growing. So I think there's a strong chance that in his final year at JMU, actually, he may have one more year after this because he's only played 3 years at JMU, and with COVID and a
Let's see how
redshirt,
COVID works, yeah.
he could be here for another year because we all didn't know Ukwu was coming back, and then Ukwu came back, and then he transferred. So who knows what's actually happening with eligibility? But he could finally have that breakout year and be kind of a really solid, kind of rotational in type of guy.
100%. All right. My last question is just a general program one, and I'm interested to see how they handle it, sort of the expectations during camp and early in the season. It's probably the highest expectations I feel like they've ever had as a program. And I know they've gone into years where it's like you should win the national championship at the FCS level. But I think there's fans who legitimately think that JMU is like a top 15 caliber team. I could argue pretty strongly that they're wrong, but I think there's a growing expectation because they got ranked last year that they should like be a fringe top 25 team, that they should contend for the Sun Belt East. And I think some of those are fair. Like some of the expectations of them like being competitive in the East is fair and things like that. So how are they going to handle the fact that like it is a higher level of football? I know that they had a great year one, but like the schedule is much harder than playing like Delaware and Taos and all this stuff. It's a hard schedule. You have expectations. The opposing teams are like well aware that you're very good. It's not just like a thing where the coaches are aware and maybe the players occasionally sort of are not as fully engaged, especially early last season. They're playing a tough schedule against teams that are going to be amped to play them with fan expectations. Like that's a lot of pressure for the players and the coaches. So I'm fascinated to see how they kind of handle that and whether they sort of lean into that in the off season leading to the season, or if they kind of downplay some of the outside noise.
I also love how they just put the biggest bullseye on their back last year by saying that they were the kings of the East.
Stuff.
And now every East team, specifically App, Marshall, and Coastal, are like gonna come guns a-blazing to them. Like that is just pure bulletin board material. So yeah, that's a great question. I'm very interested to see. I think saying that this team should compete for Sun Belt East every year is a reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
But I don't think the expectation should be that they're a fringe top 25 team on a year in and year out basis. The top teams in the Sun Belt East sometimes are top 25 teams, but like there's been years App wins the Sun Belt East and they're not ranked. Like it's not a foregone granted, the Sun Belt I think is stronger today than it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, but at the same time, like just because you're one of the better teams in the Sun Belt doesn't automatically mean you're a top 25, top 15 team in the nation.
Right. And
especially I think to bring this back to conference realignment, like with all of that happening, these Big 10 teams, these Big 12 teams, these SEC teams are playing arguably, I don't think you could really argue it, better competition on a week in and week out basis. So a team that might be, 6-3 and JMU's 9-0.
Right.
At 6-3, like JMU fans are going to have to get used to a 6-3 team being the 25th team, and JMU might receive 2 votes. Like you kind of have to get ready for that.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure how I think the fans. That's a good question, right? How the fans are going to adjust, and then for the fan expectations, the internal expectations. I think some of that too will be interesting on like an individual game basis, where last year beat App State, beat ODU, beat Coastal, the loss to Marshall, your quarterback didn't play, which gives you essentially a free pass. Like if you're the coaches, right? Like everyone's just like, well, if Centennial plays, we win that game, which like possibly true because they had plenty of chances to.
No, that's true.
I think they would win without him, but or with him, sorry. Obviously not without him, but it would have been helpful to have him. They could have won that game for sure. But it's one where like some of your bigger rivals, he took care of business. You've got ODU, App State, Coastal, and UVA this year. Like if you go 7-5 and 2-2 in those, how do you view it? How do players view it? How do fans view that? Right?
So say they win all of their rivalry games. So Marshall win, App win, Coastal win, ODU win. So that's 4 wins. And then a UVA win.
Okay.
But you finish with only those 5 wins, which is very unlikely considering that you are beating like the upper echelon Sun Belt team. But say those are your only 5 wins. Is it
Did
a
they get
successful
Bucknell?
season?
Did they clip Bucknell?
Of course. Okay, sorry. 6
Okay,
wins.
so they go 6-6 with their 6 wins all over. That'd be so funny. I think in some ways you'd still view it positively, but you might need the context of like were guys hurt. Like if you're fully healthy the whole year and you're like laying eggs in some games you feel like you should win, I think fans would be kind of frustrated, and so would the coaches and players probably.
Yeah. But all right. I just wanted to know. Ready for my last question?
Yes.
All right. Do I go offense or defense?
Let's see. Let's go defense.
All right. What type of growth are we going to see out of this secondary from last year to this year? This is a secondary that, if I'm not mistaken, I looked at last year's 2 deep for the final game against Coastal. They only lost 1 guy, and that was Francis Meehan. So they were young and inexperienced. It was a lot of transfers. It was a lot of freshmen, redshirt freshmen. Yeah. Assuming they grow on their projected trajectory, how good is this secondary going to be? I think they're going to be slight regression from the defensive line standpoint. Not a lot, but I think they were the second best defensive line according to EPA last year. And you're going to hear me mention expected points added a lot this season. It's one of my favorite stats to contextualize how good a unit is. Defensive line was fantastic last year, which helped the secondary because the defensive line was getting to a quarterback in like 2 seconds, which really helps the secondary when you only have to defend and guard against a guy for 2 seconds. We saw when a team was able to give their quarterback a little bit more time, Georgia Southern, they got smoked. So with the defensive line regressing, meaning they're going to have to cover guys and maybe be exposed a little bit more, how will that trajectory go? I'm also really interested to see how Chauncey Logan, Devin Coles, and Brent Austin kind of play and see where they slot in. And I'm excited to see where Nakai Meredith, Antoine Booth, and Travell Mullen, all those transfers that have come in over the last few seasons, slot in as well, because they haven't, specifically Meredith and Booth, didn't necessarily make a lot of starts last year, if I'm not mistaken.
And you got D'Angelo Pons, the true freshman who had an interception based on a highlight video. I'm toying with the nickname for him, Deep End. Ponds, water, like when you go one-on-one with him, you're in the deep end.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. So I need him to play so I can start trotting that out there officially. But it's weird because like the corner room maybe feels more talented but younger. But then safety, they're like 6 deep with a bunch of old guys, a bunch of old heads.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, okay, here's my question. Who would be your safeties? So the 6 I think that are old are Q Reed. You have Reminick, the Arkansas State transfer, Surratt, Chukwunicki, Meehan. There's another one though.
Didn't Meehan graduate?
Meehan's still here.
Wait,
left though. They lost Sam Kidd.
Meehan was a redshirt senior last year? Oh my God, COVID is messing with my perception.
Yeah, Meehan's back. So put that in your notes. But who's the other guy? I thought that was 5. He said they liked 6, so maybe there's another.
Jamari Somerville, Jacob Thomas, DJ Barksdale.
I just don't remember who. Maybe he's got one in his mind that he was mentioning at media day that I don't know. But anyway, they've got at least 5. Who are you like leaving out in that group? And then apparently Devin Coles can also play safety, Signetti said.
Maybe that's the 6th.
Maybe he's 6, yeah.
Who's my 2 safeties?
I think their plan will be like a 4-2-5 with 3 safeties and 2 corners.
Okay. So I guess my picks would be Surratt.
Yeah.
Probably Meehan because he has that starting experience. I'd either go Q Reed or Jarius Reminick.
Yeah, and then Chuck Winnicki's good in the box and
Oh
stuff.
yeah,
It's
Chuck Winnicki's a really good. What do they call him? The
the
Rover.
rover. I guess they use one of the safeties to technically like the rover. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with those guys and how they keep them like engaged and rotated because that's one where like those spots you can legit go with like who's playing the best that week. Like
Yes.
they're so experienced that I think you could flip. Whereas corner, it's like they're probably better. Like I don't think any of the safeties are going to play in the NFL, right? I think that's maybe a fair. Like at least they're not going to get drafted.
That's
I
really
wouldn't
rude.
think.
That's really
I
rude.
don't mean that offensively. I don't think any of them like they've been around for like 5 or 6 years. They're solid
Yes.
players, but I don't know if they have like that NFL. We're like Chauncey Logan, pretty interesting guy with his size. You've got Mullen was like a 4-star going to Indiana. Like there's a ton of talent there, but they're
Yes.
super young.
Yeah.
What a weird secondary.
I'm so excited to see how the secondary evolves because they were a liability at times last year.
Right. That's the other thing too, right? It's like they got cooked against Georgia Southern.
And they
And then
got cooked in like other games too, but the quarterback, like against ODU, I think it was, there was a couple times
Mhm.
early on in that game that like the quarterback just couldn't connect on wide open receivers.
in Georgia State, they gave up some like horrible busted coverages
Yes.
when in that game. So like
And
there
they
was
can't
some
tackle all the time, like on the second level. Like if a
yeah.
runner gets to the second level, it was just like bye. Because like the angles were all wrong. Like it was a very, very freshman secondary last year.
That's what I'm so interested in with the old safeties. It's like, all right, like you've been around a long time. You've played pretty much everyone, even the transfers now in the scheme. Like you've got to go out there and really compete for a spot in fall camp. So I'm excited to see what they do at safety and then corner,
Yep.
how they split up snaps with those young players because they've got options at every spot.
Yeah. Have you done all of your 3-year questions?
Yes.
I went first. Okay, so you ready for some Twitter questions?
Yeah, go.
What will this year's thing to complain about be?
That's a great question. Right, because they've fixed sort of the in stadium stuff, allegedly, right? We haven't actually seen it yet. They fixed it on paper.
I may be complaining still about the hot cocoa lines
Uh-huh.
because that was a little like concession lines. They haven't done anything to fix concessions. They fixed beer.
They did. They do. They did. They've got grab and go now.
Oh, that's right. I wonder if that includes hot cocoa.
That's a good hot cocoa. That could be our complaint. So hot cocoa is a possibility. I think you can always dust off the oldie but goodie, which is student attendance and like not staying after halftime. That's a fun one to just throw out there in October and be like, this team deserves butts in the seats for 4 quarters. So that's a fun one. While I like don't go to the game myself, one of my that's always a good one. So that's a possibility.
Yeah, we'll see. We gotta wait for week 1 to see what the Twitter sphere is saying, and then we can
Yeah.
get something.
And then on the field, like a close loss in a game that you want to win, where like maybe they're a little bit too conservative on like 4th and shorts would be a super easy like coaching one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll keep that one in the back pocket.
Question number 2. I'm gonna go to what would you pick for the new Team Walk-In song because it's no longer Can't Hold Us, allegedly.
Right. Right. I don't know, but I don't think I should be in charge of picking this would be my answer, which is a bad answer.
Anything but Can't Hold Us.
Something that wasn't like popular in what was it, 2012? And
2013.
like popular is like in quotes.
Popular when I was in high school.
Yeah, something a little more modern. And I feel like if you get like player input, that would probably end up being
Yes.
a cool song. And then the other option is like just play a hype video that doesn't then get followed by like Macklemore. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to have a song. You could just play like the fight song and a hype video, and I'd be check. That checks a box for me.
Yeah. The second part of that question, are you okay with them never playing Start Wearing Purple at Bridgeforth again? Hot take, yes. It started in the convo. I think it should stay in the convo.
It's a weird song.
I guess it should stay in the Atlantic Union Bank Center. Sorry.
Right. It's a weird song. So I'm okay if they play it a little less. I know some people might love it. It's one that my brother has sort of mocked me relentlessly when it comes on. He's like, "What is this?" Like, so like after games, he'll just be near me and be like, "Start wearing purple." So I'd be okay without it because it's one that I don't think has 100% buy-in. It does from the MRDs,
Yes.
but I don't think it does.
I don't think it even does from the MRDs.
Okay,
there was an
that's tough.
MRD who responded to this question. I think Carson Polk. If I'm not mistaken, I think he was a sousaphone. And Carson, if you're listening and I'm wrong, blast me on Twitter. But I think he even said it should only be in the convo or like be
Yeah,
sparingly used
I
at
think that's
football.
fair. They
Like I'd rather hear Buffalo Mash, which is one of their stand tunes, one of their team, or Get It On more.
yeah, throw anything out there, you know?
But yeah, okay. Biggest strength that the Dukes have going into 2023. Tyler said running back is his personal pick. He's looking forward to seeing Kalon Black. Dude is an absolute monster and was a big factor in the App State game. He did say he seems to fly under the radar. Tyler, I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I don't think he flies under the radar. I think he's just hurt.
Yeah, if he had like a full season of stats, I think he would get more recognition within Sun Belt fan bases. What's your pick here for biggest strength?
I think the biggest strength is offensive line. All of the questions we just had, none of them were about the offensive line. This is a unit that returns, I think, 100% of the snaps from a year ago. And they're really good, and they were really good last year. I think they were a big reason that Todd Centeio took that jump. I think they're a big reason each quarterback takes that jump underneath Kurt Cignetti. I think they are by far the best group.
I enjoyed this from Media Day. There was some interview where Cignetti mentioned that the projected starting five, has 118 combined starts. And then Nick Kidwell was talking to someone, got the number twisted in his head and said they had 180. That's how confident this group feels that they've had 180 combined starts, which over the five guys that'd be like what? That's over 30. That's like 40 starts or something. That'd be like everyone has played and started for 4 consecutive, which would be nuts. But anyway, 118 is a lot. I think Cignetti said they have like their top 8 from last year back. So they're deep there too. That seems like the biggest strength. Like they've got multiple guys that could be all conference players and they're deep. I don't think there are any offensive line question marks, which is huge.
Biggest weakness.
Biggest weakness. Can I say special teams as a group? Does that count?
I'll take that.
I would say that's kind of my biggest weakness. Last question still.
I would agree with that, but I'm going to say secondary until they prove me wrong.
I like that one as well.
All right. So those are all of the big questions. Did we forget any major questions that is looming over this training camp?
Just the one.
Which one's that? Sorry.
That one is one that I feel like we've gotten some answers to here with a 17-second video posted by JMU Football.
Who's the starting quarterback, Bennett? Tell me.
I'm still sticking with McLeod until sort of told otherwise, you know.
But Barnett's delivery is quick and clean.
He does throw a tight spiral, dude. That makes it tough when you see a tight spiral on Twitter. It's like, is he the guy?
McLeod, I know it was in slow-mo, but man, McLeod's delivery looked a little slow.
And the ball wasn't as tight. It had a slight wobble to it.
Can I look a little bit too much into something?
Yeah.
So yesterday when Dave Riggert asked Kurt Cignetti after day 1 of fall camp, the question was, talk a little bit about the quarterback battle. And Cignetti said, Jordan McLeod ran with the ones today. And we'll see and we'll know. We'll take it from there. Did not mention Barnett. Did not mention Griffin. Did not mention Billy Atkins. I'm just saying he's saying it by not saying it. Jordan McLeod's the starter.
I love that. I posted the 17-second video of them throwing and told told people to say who they thought would start and why. We had a couple good answers. We had Fortitude Fit SC say elbow sleeve, so it's McLeod because he has the elbow sleeve. Good. I like that logic. Brian McLaughlin said they should create a robo version combining the key traits of all of them, which I actually like a lot. If they could start like doing robotic quarterbacks,
they should ask JMU Robotics to get on that.
See if they could do that. Yeah. We had a Rolling Stones reference in there, Barnett answer, and then the one that I like, Coach Clark had replied and said, based on the clip, Cignetti is as likely to start as anyone else. And I think to tweak that, the way they should name the starter is sort of like Harry Potter with the sorting hat, where they put the big Cignetti sun hat on each quarterback, and then like whatever just feels right, Cignetti goes with that guy.
What was I going to say? There was another point I was going to make. Arm sleeve.
Oh, that's a good one.
Former JMU linebacker Diamante Tucker Dorsey did throw his 2 cents into the ring and said 14 is my guy.
That's Barnett. That's the youngster.
You were confused because you did not know that their time overlapped. I did have to let you know that Alonzo Barnett came in the spring, so did spend at least a little bit of spring practice with Tucker Dorsey.
They know each other, so that explains.
That's the only reason he's saying that. He does not know any other quarterback. He knows Billy Atkins.
I'm excited to see the battle. It's hard for me to go against McLeod. You mentioned he went with the ones. We don't know if, maybe that's already out of date. Maybe Barnett got the ones on Thursday. But he also mentioned at Media Day the benefit of having experience. McLeod has a ton of experience. It just seems like he's got the edge until we're specifically told otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. So this has been the JMU Sports News Podcast presented by Bet Online. If you're in Harrisonburg, Charlottesville, Roanoke, Virginia Beach, or Richmond, be sure to check out 3 Notch. They're in all of those locations. You can head to 3 Notch website to check out their fresh beer club to get fresh beer each and every month straight from the, what are they called? Not the distillery, the brewery. Straight from the brewery. And if you're in Harrisonburg or Weir's Cave, check out Christopher William Jewelers. Thank y'all for tuning in. See you next week. We have a special guest coming on next week to talk more about this quarterback situation. For Bennett Conlon, I'm Jack Fitzpatrick. See ya.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.